This panel is on renewing our growth cities, live, learn and earn locally. And if I could call our panellists to the stage now. Lindy Deitz is General Manager of Campbelltown City Council. Lindy's worked in local government for over 23 years and became the GM at Campbelltown in October 2015. She's a well-respected local government professional, recognised by government, business and the community, who leads a council which is home to Sydney's newest regional city centre. Sarah Hill is the Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Sydney Commission. Sarah is a leader in the planning of communities and she's gained national and international recognition for her work. As Greater Sydney Commission CEO, her key roles are to shape the future planning direction of Sydney as a global city and bring collaboration and a high level of consultation into the planning process. David Rolls is the National Development Director of Property at Lendlease. David has over 30 years of experience in property construction, design and development, with a particular focus on complex major mixed-use development projects, including urban regeneration projects like Barangaroo, Darling Quarter, Australian Technology Park, RNA, Brisbane and Victoria Harbour. And our final panellist, Dr. Kerry Schnott, is the Chair of the Moorebank Intermodal Company, Chair of Transgrid, Director of NBN Co, T Corp New South Wales and Infrastructure Australia. She's a member of several government advisory boards, Sydney Metro, Sydney Light Rail and Healthshare New South Wales. Previously, Kerry was Managing Director and CEO of Sydney Water, and prior to that, Deputy Secretary of New South Wales Treasury, following a stellar career in investment banking. And I'd also like to welcome our facilitator for this panel, the Western Sydney Director of the Sydney Business Chamber, David Borger, who will give a short scene-setting address before a panel discussion. David joined the Chamber in 2012 and has been instrumental in the Badgerys Creek Airport, Powerhouse to Parramatta and Sydney Olympic Park to Parramatta Light Rail advocacy conversations. Prior to this, as you no doubt know, he served as Minister for Roads, Minister assisting the Minister for Transport and Roads, Minister for Housing and Minister for Western Sydney in the New South Wales Government. Please welcome David Borger and our panellists.
Well, thanks for that introduction. And Chris Brown has told me that I have to be controversial to wake everyone up. So watch out, guys. And I've been told Tim Williams is going to be interesting. I'm going to be controversial. So that's the drum. I just wanted to introduce this topic. So renewing, regenerating city centres in Western Sydney. What are we talking about? Well, I've kind of defined it as the city centres and not just the whole landmass of local government areas, because I think we need to give these downtowns, these civic cores, some attention. And I just wanted to quickly broaden out the context to try and understand what's happening in cities. And this is, nothing in here is remarkably new or original, tragically. You've probably heard it all before today. But I do think it's important to sort of set the scene. Obviously, these places are growing. They're growing strongly. They grew strongly in the past decade. They're going to grow even more strongly in the next decade. We know why, because housing's more affordable and Sydney's constrained. It's constrained by a sclerotic planning system where we've over-regulated housing and we've prevented young people, poor people, newcomers from living right where the great jobs are in the middle of the downtown. And so people are moving to all over Western Sydney and we expect that growth to continue. And we know the challenge is the jobs are growing in here, where the agglomeration is in Sydney, North Ryde and those sorts of places. Start with David from Lendlease. Dave, you grew up in Green Valley. You got out, you got a great job. But you know, hasn't the politics been wrong in local government? That, you know, mayors and councillors, they're interested in potholes. No one's interested in the downtowns, are they? How do we change that?
You said you were going to be controversial, so you started off well. I think the role of cities and Western cities is really important as to how the joint venture nature of working with councils and private sector is really important. I think we all need to lift our game as far as how that works, because it's only through the ability for the private sector to deliver and the councils or state governments to allow the private sector to deliver where you get those great outcomes. Because it's not just about putting up density and creating housing, because you need the jobs. You also need the amenity, and that all comes from a whole different approach to how you would normally do it.
So are you viewed with suspicion when you walk into the front counter, or are you welcomed with open arms to say, come and bring the investment? Is it changing?
I think that's why we've got the Greater Sydney Commission, isn't it?
Is that your job to change all of that, Sarah?
I'm actually solving world peace this year, and then I'll get onto that.
Great. But Sarah, I mean, I looked at the draft district plans. Great work. very, very large documents to wade through. Very little in any of them are objectionable, and some wonderful visions. But if your plan's going to work, isn't the challenge, you've got to get the infrastructure, and that's separate to your plan. That's in the state infrastructure strategy, the long-term transport master plan. Are you confident that you can get those decision makers to deliver on your plans?
Well, just a couple of things there. Yes, the plans are comprehensive, and certainly if we had longer, we might have written them shorter, but there is a lot of good ideas in them. But we need more than ideas, we need action, and it's certainly not lost on me that action one of the plan is infrastructure priority list. And so, our role is to design a strategic vision for the city, and we're working on that, and we've got the bones of that. But also our role is to recognise really where those priorities are for transport in line of land use planning. So the wonderful thing about the architecture of our organisation is an infrastructure delivery committee that's really going back to the basics of where is that housing growth happening and where could it occur? How do we better align big bits of kit with that? And then, importantly, looking at it on a geographic basis, bringing government together there. So, we see very much our role initially is to collaborate at that initial point. And then really we see as the plans are being developed further and finalised, because I'm the first to say they are a point in time and a starting point. I think from there, we will then be working with Lindy and with David to actually work through the next level of infrastructure that's required, because I absolutely agree with you about the importance of amenity in these areas. This is what's changing our view of cities, and that desirability is absolutely key.
But we're in agreement that the amenity is critical to make them more attractive investment location and to make them places people are proud of. But amenity costs money, it needs vision, it needs planning. And if we wait for Lindy's Section 94 funds to fill up, that's another 5 or 10 years, and that's not going to build that bridge there in Campbelltown. So we need to bring other money to that urban solution, don't we?
Look, there's no doubt we've got to rethink how we're doing things, and that's certainly something as a commission, as an independent organisation, we're challenging, and we're challenging ourselves, and we're challenging government about how we do this, and I think that's really critical. But the truth of the matter is we need more of everything, and I think very much our approach is to prioritise those key elements. And that's a really tough ask, and prioritising something's dependent on your assumptions and your presumptions, and so for that reason it's a really big task. But I think we've got to get better at doing that. I'm the first to say that we do need to rethink how we're funding things, and it has to be a joint approach to it.
Now, Lindy, you're in the driver's seat as the CEO of a big council in southwest Sydney, newly appointed. How long is it going to take you to regenerate and renew your centre, and what do you need from Sarah and from others?
I think that... sorry. Got my microphones. I think for Campbelltown, we have completed a transformation plan for our CBD. We're about to move into our master planning phase to further articulate our vision for our CBD, and I absolutely concur that amenity and livability is really critical, particularly in southwestern Sydney, who has really suffered from a social inequity perspective in terms of the fact that people have to do those long distances to travel and they don't get to enjoy being at home. So we do need to create the livable cities. But the only thing that I think is challenging is the fact that you don't want to put the cart before the horse. In all reality, one of our greatest challenges in Campbelltown is our connectivity and collaboration with our neighbours in Western Sydney. So that's all well and good to revitalise a CBD, but if it takes you an hour to get from the CBD centre to the freeway exit, then what's the point? Because you're not going to build economies that way. So I think it's about prioritisation of what is needed in terms of infrastructure, and I agree with Sarah that it is very much a collaboration piece between all levels of government, but also the major stakeholders and institutions that exist within a city. Now, we're really blessed in Campbelltown in the sense that we had forethought to put lands away for future generations. So in some ways we're a little bit of a blank canvas. So we do have an opportunity to get our point of difference. We are a very green city. We have those attributes you're talking about. Now it's about building up our capacity to make that more contemporary, much more sophisticated, and have other avenues of accessibility and connectivity within the city. But you've got to get the connectivity from Western Sydney to Western Sydney and create those high knowledge jobs and make them available before you can start focusing on investment in the CBD. That's how I see it in any case.
But if you can get to Campbelltown much more easily than you can now, and there's still challenges with the urban fabric and the look and feel of the place, I mean, you still got to get over that barrier, don't you? I mean, you've got to actually, you've got to recreate the centre of Campbelltown to make it a much more interesting place before you can attract investment.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think that certainly for us in southwestern Sydney, we feel far more optimistic than we ever have with the Greater Sydney Commission now, because it is about placemaking. It is about setting a vision for a city and getting the community on board to own their vision for their city. So absolutely, it's work that has to be done together at the same time, and that's why we're very much focused on transformation plans, master plans and visions that future-proof our city, because our growth will happen at a different pace. And we have the luxury of available land for both greenfield development and urbanisation to do it in a very high quality public domain way. So we will capitalise on those opportunities.
I mean, not far from here, well, not too far from here, there was a rapidly growing area of Sydney, absolutely bizarre. It's like a little bit of Manhattan's taken out, floated down the Parramatta River and plonked at Wentworth Point, where you've got a very high density population, but there was no way to get from there to the train station, to the shopping centre, to the other high density population. And frankly, council and planning kind of bucked past this for a decade. They didn't know what to do with the ball, it never landed. And so John Kinsella came along and pulled together 60 million or whatever it was and finally built this bridge, which has been a massive success. So, I mean, can we encourage more of that sort of activity to fix some of these problems of our city centres?
Just simple, yeah, we have to. I think it's absolutely critical. I'd like to just sort of pick up on some of Lindy's really important points. I'd also say that a refocus back on the centres is critical. Our plans very much focus on the critical importance of them. Sydney has been incredibly successful in creating a great series of 43 district and strategic centres, but we need to recognise the value and the complementary value of each of them, and not have a cookie cutter approach to them of kind of planning in the past. One size doesn't fit all, and I think there's a great undercurrent of activity and passion in each of the LGAs that we're working with to recognise the great value and differences of those areas. So I think that's absolutely important. And I think, when I talk about priorities, because it's one thing I've learned in life, we have to prioritise priorities. And for me, those centres and those real economic opportunities within them are a critical element to work on and to improve that desirability. And kind of, very much to your point, let's just stop talking and start doing. We've known for a long time we need to be doing these things. We've got to start committing to it.
Kerry, you'd like to stop talking and start doing it Moorebank, and yet, some of the local community and the council have had, some question marks around this massive project. I was really impressed to see Ian present and say that there would be 7,000 jobs coming out of the Moorebank Intermodal. What's it going to do for? I mean, why do you think it is the community haven't embraced it?
I think mainly the reason is that we've been very quiet about the benefits of Moorebank, and we've been reluctant about being too open about it until we've had planning approval and everything has been tucked away. We have literally started work out there now, and we're literally days away from finalising agreements. I think you'll find that we're out there a great deal more. For those of you that aren't familiar with Moorebank, let me just tell you a little bit about it. The Department of Defence used to have, well indeed still does have, but had a very large amount of land at Moorebank, which the Commonwealth Government has put together with land that Cube, the logistics company, own, to create a very large intermodal terminal for freight. And it's about 240 hectares, which, just to put that in perspective, stretches from Circular Quay to Central and from Barangaroo to the other side of the art gallery. So we're talking about a very large amount of land. There is so much container freight coming through Port Botany that Port Botany can no longer handle the volumes, and the M5 certainly can't handle the number of trucks on it that are carrying containers. And one of the reasons that everybody's complaining about transport in Western Sydney is because congestion is so bad. What will happen at Moorebank is that a rail shuttle will run from Port Botany to Moorebank along a dedicated freight line, which is already in existence. We will put a spur in off the Southern Sydney freight line, and we intend to carry 1 million containers from the port every year and about 500,000 containers from interstate and regional agricultural produce going out through Port Botany. So we've had studies done about how much jobs it will create, and it will create about 6,800 jobs in Liverpool. That's about 10% of the current jobs in that local government area. They're not going to be unskilled jobs either. About 30% of them will be unskilled jobs, mainly in warehousing. About 20% will be university jobs, largely in robotics and logistics, and about 50% will be trade jobs. And we're talking with TAFE and the universities about this, and we want to set up a Centre of Logistics Excellence at Moorebank. I think once the opportunities that this offers becomes apparent to the people in local government in Liverpool, we'll start getting a few more people loving us. The reason why the community doesn't embrace us at the moment is that there are some homes that will be affected by this very large terminal going in, and my sympathy goes out to them. They've been there for a long time, and they've just been overlooking gum trees and every now and again dogs training before they go to Afghanistan, and that is no more. We will minimise the impact and minimise noise and light, and do what we can to fit in with the community. You had a shot up about Liverpool a while ago. We need to put some more walking tracks, using that bridge column across the river, and we need to use the riparian zone and put some more sporting fields in, and all of these things we can help the council deliver. So I think you'll find that this is a terrific development for Moorebank and the Liverpool local government area, and indeed for Sydney.
And it won't overwhelm the town centre in terms of traffic movements and all of that?
No, we're well away from the town centre, and the government's been doing a lot of work on local road impacts and setting aside some corridors so that we can link the terminal up to the M7, and our impact on the roads, insofar as there's traffic coming out of the terminal, it'll be people delivering things in small trucks of, televisions and clothing and the like.
David, I might just come back to you for a second. So Lendlease are obviously in the whole building game, residential, commercial, civic, infrastructure projects and so on. So, and you come from out Western Sydney way. What do you think is the most... Why haven't we had more commercial offices? I mean, frankly, we haven't met the targets, have we? We've failed miserably at meeting the targets. Population keeps growing. I know we've got a bit of a spur on in Parramatta at the moment. I think that's going to be done. Not done, but I mean, that's going to be a very significant boost. But outside of that, which is still a bit yet to come, We haven't got there. Why is that?
I think you're talking about jobs, it all depends on the type of jobs as well. And Western Sydney will have more, by a factor of probably 5 jobs than the Sydney CBD. It's a matter of what type of jobs do you want to attract. And employers will vote with their feet, and they'll look to put their people where they think they can attract the best talent. The war for talent is everywhere. It's in every city around the globe, and the talent that will be attracted to those employers, because it's actually the people you want to employ are interviewing you, not you interviewing them, they'll go to where the best amenity and the best community outcome is, and the ease of getting there. And so there's a lot of complex factors that go into it. You talk about Parramatta is getting there, and a lot of investments happened, but not only the private sector, the public sector as well has put a lot of effort into getting Parramatta going. I think we need more of that in Blacktown, Penrith, Campbelltown, Liverpool, because it's that vision, and the 20-year thing's been talked about a bit today. What does it need to look like in 20 years? Well, the private sector and public sector need to get together and actually say, what are the steps to getting there in 20 years? Because 20 years is about the size of a big project. Some of the projects we've got in our communities are 20-year projects, and we need to think that way, and we need to think about how we joint venture and get the governance word dealt with too. And I think we hide behind governance as an issue in terms of how we work with councils, because by hiding behind it, why the bridge didn't get built for 10 years that John's put in was because it was all too hard. So we need to think about that as well.
So we've just got 2 minutes to go. I'm going to ask you all, if you had $100 million, you've won the lottery, you can only spend it on one thing to regenerate and renew these centres out in Western Sydney. Can't spend it on yourself. One thing, and it's got to be, what do you personally think, what do you have a hunch is actually going to shift the needle in these places and making them more interesting, renewed places? Sarah, start with you.
Yeah, I like doing things. I'm not the most creative of people, but there are just some simple layers of things that we should do. And I sort of first instinct, sure, kickstart with a catalyst of a new, office and try to encourage investment on the back of that is one option. And then kind of just thinking more broadly about trees. So much when you go to a place is, I was walking down the streets of Melbourne on the weekend with a rowing crew I was competing with, and just intuitively you felt better in one street versus another because of trees, and it was attractive, and it was the same sort of funky bars and nightclubs and all the rest of it. But, simple things like that make a difference. I wouldn't say to change the pavement, but certainly, kickstarting a catalyst with some commercial office development, which is just frankly not viable in many cities, and just starting to improve that public domain and kind of having that little ripple effect to try and build on a centre. But I'd probably not spread it everywhere. I'd probably focus it on kickstarting one area, moving to the next.
Kerry?
I'd probably spend it on planning where the next Sydney Metros ought to go. I came from a Sydney Metro board meeting this morning, and the impact that project is having on Rouse Hill and suburbs in the Blacktown and Hills area is just going to is phenomenal and will be phenomenal. And the next extension of it going through to Sydenham and Blacktown is going to be a real game changer. And the next phases of Metro after that, with the promise to connect Campbelltown and Liverpool and Parramatta and Penrith and the new airport, I think are really exciting and game changers. The city just needs better connectivity, and we haven't really put enough work into working out exactly where that ought to go, I don't think.
Lindy, not a council vote? You've been given delegation from your council.
No, well, certainly that's just a no-brainer for me. It's about what I would spend it on is connecting Western Sydney regional cities to each other and to the Western Sydney airport, because that's what's going to make it all happen.
Yep. David?
As well as the transport, I'd put it into attracting the education providers into our town centres. 2 reasons: it attracts the youth that we want, that gives the city's vibrancy, but it also is anti-cyclical. It will override residential, commercial boom busts. It just keeps going and going, and it's going to grow. I think it'll be a huge catalyst to each of our towns.
get
Could we have
Lendlease
400
to
million?
Sorry?
Could we have 400 million between us and do it
Yeah,
all?
why not? It's lottery money. We could get Lendlease to build them too, David. Can you please join me in thanking our 4 panellists today, renewing the centres. Thank you.